Oh, we're live. Hey guys, how are you tonight? Thanks for joining me. I don't think I have any funny stories. Not that you guys probably think the stories are funny. I'm trying to think if I have one. Nope, don't have one. Do you have one? All I could think about was the fact that our trash can is like trying to get into Fort Knox when I try to open it.
Oh, because of Cassie?
Yeah, we have a dog that consistently gets in the trash can. And she's old. Well, she's like 8.5. But the whole time that I've had her, seriously, she's had like an issue getting in a trash can all the time. And so I just kind of got in the habit of putting the trash up on the counter before I would leave. And sometimes she would be smarter than that, and she would actually tip it off of the counter to get into it. And so now what we have to do is, because if we leave the house without locking the trash can, she will get into it. And so my lovely Vanna White is over here to show us what the trash can looks like. So we have a lock, and we have to put a pin in the lock because she can open that lock. It's a little ridiculous at this point, I think. But she actually set off the house alarm once because she couldn't get into the trash can. And so she tipped it over and pulled it into the kitchen, and it made a loud enough bang that it set off some sensors in the house. And so I had to come home because I thought that somebody was breaking into our house. And sure enough, it was just our big dumb dog trying to get into our trash can. So there's that. There's the famous Matthew Brigham walking by right there. Nice little wave to the crowd. Okay, so tonight we are going to talk hormones. It is a super rad topic, if you're familiar with the word rad. And it's also a super hard topic to talk about. I do balance hormones. I do specialize in hormone balancing. But I will tell you that writing this blog, and not just writing this blog, but anytime I deal with hormones, it seriously makes my brain hurt. I don't think that people understand how many hormones we have in our body. So we have over 50 hormones at any given time, are doing a plethora of different things. And it's important to kind of keep them all in balance, or in balance, not imbalanced. And so hormones are, it's almost like a very delicate balance, right? So they get out of balance and you're going to feel it right away. You have too much of one, you're going to feel it right away. You've got too little of another, you're going to feel it right away. But often what I see is a lot of these issues that we're having, we are not attributing them to hormone imbalance when we should be. I've seen people that have very classic signs of hormone imbalance, but they don't really attribute it to hormone imbalance. They attribute it to something else, how they're digesting their food, or are they getting enough sleep, or probably just something that they ate. And a lot of times it can be very easy to get our hormones back in balance, and sometimes it's very difficult. I struggled with a hormone imbalance myself. I have HPA axis dysregulation. Basically, I stressed myself into a tizzy, and so my organs don't necessarily function how they should be. So for me, hormones are a big part of my life. They are the root cause of any fatigue that I have, and I have worked very hard to get them back to kind of functioning normal. We're not quite there, but it does take some time to get there. Let's see. Oh, I closed all my rings today. Aw, congratulations to me. If you have an Apple Watch, you know how awesome that is. Okay, so we're going to talk mainly, because like I said, there's over 50 hormones in the body. We're going to mainly talk sex hormones. So we're going to hit on pregnenolone, which most of you have never heard of before. Sorry, you can hear the dogs scooting their dishes around because they just ate dinner and trying to lick every last morsel out of their bowl. The little guy can't get it tipped over. Bring it here, buddy. Beauregard, bring it here. Hold on, let me put him out. Let me help him out here for a second. There you go. Oh, you got it. You just put that down, silly. There you go. He picked it up, put it on the carpet, but then put it right back down, face down, so he couldn't get into the bowl. That's silly, Billy. Okay, so like I said, we have over 50 hormones in the body, right? but we're going to focus on pregnenolone. Like I said, most of you have probably never heard of, or maybe you have if you've been kind of searching the interwebs and things like that. We're going to talk about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and cortisol. So it's not just women that suffer from hormone imbalances. Low T is a common thing that we see today. So we're going to hit on low T a little bit for the guys that are joining me. So let's get to it. So I posted, if you haven't read the blog yet, I linked the blog into the notes on the live broadcast. I would take a look at it. If you don't want to read the blog because it's easier to listen to people, fully get it. I'm a reader, so I like to read something versus listening to a video. That's kind of why I do this both ways. But I put a picture of the hormone pathways just for the sex hormones in the blog for you, so you can see how super convoluted this whole process is. You've got hormones that work, they go up and down, they go left and right, they work forward, they work reverse. So when I break this down for you, just know that it is a super oversimplification of how hormones act and interact in the body. Before I start, sorry, I should have let you guys all know, go ahead and post your comments. I do monitor them as I'm talking. And so if you have a question about something I said, go ahead and put it in the chat box, and I will make sure that I get to it. I like to answer everybody's questions while I'm live. And then if you're watching this after the fact, go ahead and post those questions as well. I do monitor the comments after the live has ended, and I will answer those as well. For those of you that are not familiar with me, my name is Sunny Brigham. I'm a board-certified clinical and integrative nutritionist, and I help people lose weight, reduce fatigue, and eliminate their bloat by balancing the hormones and repairing their gut. And yes, my lovely husband pointed out that men have hormones too. Trust me, I know that men have hormones. Okay, so like I said, I would take a look at the blog just so you can see like how crazy hormones can be and how the process is. Sometimes it's hard to pinpoint where the disconnect is when it comes to hormone balancing. I'm a huge fan of testing when it comes to hormones because trying to figure out just by symptom alone makes it pretty difficult, and you'll see here in a minute why. A lot of the symptoms are very similar. So if your estrogen is off, your progesterone's off, your testosterone's off, your cortisol's off, your pregnenolone's not functioning the way that it should, the symptoms are fairly similar across the board. So it's super difficult to figure out which hormone is not functioning appropriately, but we also want to know why. So why is this hormone not working the way that it should? And we'll talk a little bit about some different things here, but I'm a huge fan of testing when it comes to hormones, because if we're going to add in, let's say, progesterone to get it to function or get it to the levels where it should be, we don't want to give too much and we don't want to get it too little, because again, it's a very delicate balance within our hormones and they all affect each other. Okay, so let's talk about the first one. So the first one is called pregnenolone. And again, this is the one that you may or may not have heard of. Pregnenolone, they call it the grandmother hormone. So if you are looking at like a flow chart, right, of hormones. We've got, everybody's seen a PowerPoint presentation or some fancy flow chart. If you're looking at a flow chart, pregnenolone sits at the top when we talk about sex hormones. And so that's why we call it the grandmother hormone. And so everything kind of stems from there. So off of pregnenolone, you've got two arms. One arm is DHEA and the other arm is progesterone. Under progesterone comes cortisol. So it goes pregnenolone, progesterone, cortisol. And then off of pregnenolone on this side, you've got pregnenolone, DHEA, and then off of DHEA come estrogen and testosterone. So I'll say that again. You've got pregnenolone at the top. Off of pregnenolone comes progesterone, and below progesterone comes cortisol. Off of pregnenolone on the other side comes DHEA. Off of DHEA comes estrogen and testosterone. So I'll say that again several times as we go through this, but just kind of having a picture, and again, it's in the blog, but it does show you that, hormones work left, right, reverse, backwards, upside down, flip-flop, and however other ways they're going to function. So pregnenolone is the grandmother hormone like we just talked about. We need cholesterol to create pregnenolone. I've written another blog on cholesterol. It's super long. I linked it in this blog. If you're battling with high cholesterol or even low cholesterol, I think it's worth the time to read it, because I think cholesterol kind of gets a bad name, right? Everybody's worried about, oh, I have high cholesterol. I need to lower my cholesterol. You can have high cholesterol. You can also have too low of cholesterol. The reason being is that a lot of our hormones come from cholesterol. We need cholesterol to create pregnenolone. So if we have low cholesterol, which does happen, we're going to have an inability to produce pregnenolone, which if we can't produce the grandmother hormone, we're not producing progesterone, we're not producing cortisol, we're not producing DHEA, we're not producing estrogen and testosterone. We're going to create them in other areas, but we're not going to create the volume that we need to sustain our hormone balance. Pregnenolone is primarily synthesized in the liver, which is where we create our own cholesterol. And then some of it comes from the adrenal glands. If you're not familiar with adrenal glands, you have a little adrenal gland. It's kind of like a triangle, and it sits right on top of either kidney. It can be created or found in a few other organs in the body, but those are the main two sites, is the liver and the adrenals. So because pregnenolone is the grandmother hormone, I will see some practitioners will go straight to supplementing pregnenolone. You can do like a pregnenolone cream. And some people will go straight to supplementing with pregnenolone when we have hormone imbalance, hoping that the pregnenolone will pull to the side that it needs to help replenish whatever hormone you might be lacking in. For me, I like to do specific individual ones based on what your body needs. And then also the testing gives me an idea, okay, where is the hang up? Where's the disconnect? And what part of the body is not functioning appropriately, so we can go ahead and get that in balance as well. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so some symptoms of low pregnenolone. Now pay attention to these because you're going to hear these a lot. So some symptoms of low pregnenolone is fatigue. It's a big one. Quite honestly, it's a symptom for all hormonal imbalance. So if you're suffering from fatigue, but you sleep great, you eat great, there's a good chance it's hormones. Dry skin, reduced mental function, so like not being able to think, not being able to concentrate, focus. You feel like your memory is kind of in the tank and it's not due to age. Reduced mental awareness, so maybe not being on point as much as you normally would, or joint or muscle pain. So those are some there. Oh, hey, Christy, and hey, Rachel. I am hey, Jackie. I'm trying so hard. Sometimes I have the habit of when I say hey to people, my voice goes up like 18 octaves, and I don't know why. I think it's just a thing, so I'm trying not to do that. My first thought was to go, hey, Rachel. So I'm glad I caught myself because that sounded horrid. All right, so pregnenolone, again, grandmother hormone. It's at the hierarchy. It's at the top of our flow chart. It's created in the liver and adrenal glands primarily, and then a couple of other peripheral organs. We need cholesterol to make it. Off of pregnenolone comes progesterone, then down to cortisol, and then DHEA, then down to estrogen and testosterone. Symptoms of low pregnenolone are fatigue, dry skin, reduced mental function, reduced mental alertness, and then joint and or muscle pain. Truly, pregnenolone will typically produce the way that it should when you repair the underlying function. So if we're primarily producing pregnenolone in the liver and in the adrenals, there's probably a disconnect in one of those. Either you don't have enough cholesterol, so maybe you're suffering from low cholesterol, which again, everybody wants low cholesterol, but you can have too low cholesterol. And so perhaps your cholesterol is too low. Perhaps your liver is not functioning the way that it should, and we're going to talk about that a bit more. And then perhaps your adrenals are not functioning a bit more. I see a lot of adrenal dysfunction in very high stress people, such as myself. And once we get to the point where our adrenals are kind of not keeping up with the body, it's like fatigue city. And so repairing that is a very long, drawn out process. It usually takes anywhere from 6 months to 18 months, depending on a whole variety of things. It's a pain in the ass, quite honestly, to get repaired. But once you do, along the way, you start to learn how to take better care of yourself, how to kind of nurture the body a little bit more so that we allow the processes to happen how they should. Okay, so let's talk progesterone. So next, like we talked about, pregnenolone is up here at the top of the flow chart, and down from that on one side is progesterone. So progesterone is at its highest just after ovulation. So your period to ovulation is going to be at your lowest. Ovulation to period, it's going to be your highest. The reason being is that progesterone helps the body prepare to accept, fertilize, and implant an egg into the uterus. If you have successful implantation, meaning that you've become pregnant, your progesterone levels will stay high and they will continue to stay elevated throughout your pregnancy. But if you don't fertilize your egg, then progesterone decreases. It signals the body to start the menstrual cycle, and so on and so forth. And then the cycle continues over and over. There's a lot of other hormones that go into play. We've got follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormones. So like I said, we're just going to talk about the main players that most people are familiar with. So if fertilization happens, we talked about that. Okay. So when we have reduced progesterone, and I'll tell you a little anecdote about myself and how I kind of got where I am as far as HPA axis dysregulation goes in a little bit. So when we have reduced progesterone, sometimes we will get symptoms of excess estrogen. When we have an estrogen dominance is what it's called. If you have read any health blog today, you've probably seen that term thrown around. And estrogen dominance is a real thing. You can have too much estrogen in your body, but you can have symptoms of estrogen dominance without actually having too much estrogen. So if you don't have enough progesterone to balance the estrogen, you're going to feel like you have too much estrogen, but you really don't. You actually have too little progesterone. So again, this is why I like to do testing, because signs of estrogen dominance are pretty clear. It's pretty easy to pick out estrogen dominance from all the other hormone issue imbalances. But you can't just go straight to saying, yes, this person has estrogen dominance because they have this, this, and this, when in reality, it could just be their estrogen's amazing, it's where it should be, but their progesterone is too low, making the body think that it has too much estrogen. So this is why testing hormones is super, super important. So things that cause low progesterone, stress is a huge one. Stress will absolutely cause low progesterone. And this is why when we are stressed, it can impact our fertility because we're not producing as much progesterone as we need to, i.e., to allow the uterus to receive a nice egg that can be implanted and fertilized. And then excess exercise. And so excessive exercise causes excessive stress on the body, which then causes lack of progesterone. And when we hit the cortisol section, it'll kind of make sense to you if you remember pregnenolone, progesterone, cortisol. So if you kind of remember, that's how the train goes. When we talk about cortisol, which is the stress hormone, that'll make a little bit more sense to you. Okay. So causes of low progesterone, stress, and excessive exercise, which is a stressor. So here's the symptoms of low progesterone. And again, these are typically tied to excess estrogen. So the symptoms are kind of look the same, but you don't really know if you have estrogen dominance or you just have too little progesterone. So symptoms of low progesterone are sleep disturbances leading to fatigue. So if you feel like you're not sleeping as well as you normally do, if it's just a one-off night or you did some traveling through time zones, completely different thing. But if it's like progressively your sleep has deteriorated over time, it might be stress causing low progesterone. Obviously, lack of sleep, lack of quality sleep is going to cause an increase in fatigue. Water retention, that's a big one. Most women notice at least 1 to 2 times a month we have a little bit of water retention. You'll notice it after you eat some, high salt foods, you'll have a little bit of water retention. But if it's like a continual water retention thing that's there all the time, that's a concern. Menstrual irregularities, so if you don't have a regular cycle, average is 28 days. I've seen some women go 23 days. I've seen some people go 32 days. So as long as your cycle is normal for you. So if you're consistently a 26-day cycler and every 26 days your cycle turns over, then that's normal. But if you're 23 and then 32 and then 28 and then 35 and then 21 and it's just kind of all over the place and hard to track, that's a good indication that your hormones are a little off. Low libido, I feel like this is something that a lot of women struggle with. Guys, it's not because we're not into you. It's just there's something bigger going on. Uterine fibroids, weight gain, and weight gain. Brain fog, I hear this a lot from my clients, the feeling like you're just not clear-headed. If you have brain fog, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But feeling like you can't think, you can't recall things that you normally would, just not being as sharp as you normally are, almost feeling like you're in a little bit of haze. Mood changes such as depression, anxiety, maybe a little bit of irritability, and some acne. Okay, so just to recap on the progesterone before we move on, because this is a lot. Hey, Steph. Is pregnenolone, and then we've got progesterone. And so pregnenolone is grandmother hormone, primarily synthesized in the liver and the adrenals. We need cholesterol to make it. Progesterone is an arm of that. It is, needed for proper menstruation, needed for fertilization of the egg. And then the two main things that will cause low progesterone is stress and excessive exercise, which is a stressor to the body. Symptoms of low progesterone also ties into high estrogen. So we may or may not have estrogen dominance. It could just be that our estrogen is perfect, but our progesterone is low. Sleep disturbances leading to fatigue, water retention, menstrual irregularities, low libido, uterine fibroids, weight gain, brain fog, mood changes, and acne. So that is progesterone. Let's see. I don't have any questions yet. Yay. Okay, so cortisol. Let's chat cortisol. So cortisol is the stress hormone. It is quite literally the bane of my existence because we release it all the time. If we exercise, we're releasing it. If we are stressed, we are releasing it. If we just got a shitty email from our boss that really ticked us off, we are releasing it. If you got an email or a bill in the mail that was unexpected, we're going to release cortisol. So anytime you feel like your chest getting a little fluttery, you're getting a little tense, you're in the process of starting to release the cortisol. Obviously, there's kind of a chain that it goes through, but cortisol is coming. I am a high stress person, so I stressed myself into having hormone imbalance, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And so we live in high stress times. I mean, there's more pressure on us today to perform and be better at work and be better people and make more money and all these other things than there has ever been. I think that a lot of that can just be attributed to the pressure that we put on ourselves or the pressure that we feel from society or friends, or we have to be the best and everything else, whatever it is that drives us. The pressure that we put on ourselves can be detrimental to our health. So cortisol, like I said, is downstream from progesterone. So pregnenolone, progesterone, cortisol. It is primarily released from the adrenal glands. Now remember the adrenals, they're kind of little triangle glands that sit on top of either kidney. And so we need cortisol at times. We don't need as much as we're creating today. Here's the thing about cortisol. It's like insulin to a diabetic. So we tend to get to a point where we have diabetes when we're consistently releasing insulin over and over and over and over and over again. Insulin comes from the pancreas. It helps to shuttle glucose into the cells so that we don't have high blood sugar. When we're creating this process over and over and over, the body's not going to be able to keep up, meaning the pancreas isn't going to be able to create as much insulin as it needs, so either can happen, our body gets numb to the amount of insulin that's being created and it's being released in the body. And so we're seeing it, but we're just like, nah, that's there every day. I don't need that. Cortisol is kind of the same way. So when we get into these cycles where we're super stressed out all the time, we're consistently releasing cortisol. And so that means that eventually our body just kind of becomes numb to it. It's like, man, what am I going to do with this? And so we have a lot of free-floating cortisol, or maybe the adrenal glands can no longer keep up with the amount of cortisol production that we need. And so things just start getting off kilter. An important thing to know is that we filter all of our hormones through our liver. And so if you are a high-stress person, you can have a perfect diet, but you can actually develop fatty liver from having too much cortisol, from being a high-stress person, from filtering all that stuff through the liver. You can eventually develop fatty liver. Doesn't mean you're going to, doesn't mean everybody gets it, but that is one reason that you can get fatty liver. So let's see here. So a few things that happen when we have too much cortisol coursing through the body at any given time. So two things can happen. One, something called pregnenolone steal, and two is HPA axis dysregulation. So HPA stands for the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal glands. So it's kind of the hormone regulation. It's a cycle. And so when one is off, it usually starts with the adrenals, then the whole cycle is off kilter. Some people call it adrenal fatigue. That used to be the name of it. The more accurate name is the HPA axis dysregulation. So let's first talk about pregnenolone steal. So pregnenolone steal is not something that's really well explained in the scientific community, meaning there are not a lot of studies on it. However, when you put pen to paper and common sense, it makes a lot of sense, right? So picture this. We've got pregnenolone at the top, remember the grandmother hormone, and we got the two little arms. This arm is progesterone and this arm is DHEA. And then below the progesterone arm, we've got cortisol. And then off of DHA, we've got our estrogen and progesterone. Now, we've only got so much cholesterol to create pregnenolone. We've only got so many enzymes to make sure everything's regulating. Our adrenals are only working so good to produce as much pregnenolone as the body needs, right? If you are high stress all the time, you've got so much stress in your life and you're not dealing with it properly, you need to create that cortisol, right? You got to get it from somewhere. And so what happens is the pregnenolone steal. So it takes it from the pregnenolone. So all the pregnenolone is filtering from pregnenolone to progesterone to cortisol. It's continuing doing that, which means it's going through the progesterone down to the cortisol. So now you have low progesterone. But it's kind of out of pregnenolone. So now we're taken from the DHEA arm. And so it's taken from DHEA going back to pregnenolone down through progesterone and into cortisol. So now not only do you have low progesterone, but you also have low estrogen and low testosterone. And so when that happens, you're kind of in a state of HPA axis dysregulation. We don't want to get there. It's a horrid place to be. Take my word on that. But quite honestly, a lot of people are. And so once we recognize that that's where it's at, we can start the repair process. It is a long haul to do so. So pregnenolone steal happens, leads to HPA axis dysregulation. So another downside, like I talked about, another downside of excess cortisol production is the liver, because we process and filter everything through the liver. It is our internal detox system. And so when we start to gum that sucker up, it's going to rebel against us and start having some fatty nodules, which can, progress to, you've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 fatty liver, and then eventually into cirrhosis if you're not taking care of yourself. So stress can contribute to liver problems. Think about that. Okay. Yesenia said, tell me about it, already treating 2 of them. Imbalanced hormones, is that what you're talking about, Yesenia? So symptoms of excess cortisol, weight gain. Well, we also saw that progesterone, right? And we also saw that with pregnenolone. Inability to lose weight, so feeling like you're doing everything you're absolutely supposed to, you're eating right, you're exercising, but you just can't get that stupid weight off your body. Mood swings, brain fog, fatigue, and more fatigue, muscle weakness, poor sleep, lowered immune function, low libido, hypertension, and blood sugar dysregulation. So I actually, and we'll talk about this before we get into estrogen and testosterone, so I actually stressed myself into HPA axis dysregulation. I tested my hormones, and I had the estrogen level of a 70-year-old. How does that make you feel? Because I am not 70. So it was pretty interesting when I saw that. And quite honestly, like, I looked at everything under the sun except my hormones first. And I should have. If I started with the hormones, I probably would be in a much better state than I am right now, because I'm still very much into the repair process. I have to really take care of myself. I have to make sure that I'm getting plenty of sleep. I have to make sure that it's quality sleep. I have to make sure that I'm maintaining my stress. I'm not stressing myself out too much. I'm not feeling too overwhelmed, and I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself in order to allow the body to repair. I mean, I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm not 70, and I'm certainly too young to have the hormone levels that I had. I mean, I was in the postmenopausal range, and I am nowhere near menopause. And fatigue was one of my biggest complaints. I felt like I was freaking tired all the time, and it was so frustrating. I am much better now than I was 7 or 8 months ago, but I know that I still have a long way to go. So take it from me, you can 100% stress yourself into HPA axis dysregulation. And then we'll add on to that I also have fatty liver. I developed fatty liver from all of this. Diet's great. I exercise. I take care of myself. But they call it lean fatty liver. So there's really no rhyme or reason for it, but it comes from too much cortisol in the body processing through my liver. So it's amazing. It's a place you don't want to be. So take care of yourself. Reduce your stress. Make sure that you have appropriate outlets for it, so that you don't get into any type of HPA axis dysregulation issues. Okay, so that is the one side of the flow chart. So again, we've got pregnenolone. It's the grandmother hormone. Off of that comes progesterone, and then down that comes cortisol. If we are in a straight state of constant stress, high stress, excess exercise, we can actually steal hormones from the chain and bring it all down to cortisol, creating, it's called pregnenolone steal, eventually leading to HPA axis dysregulation. Symptoms of low progesterone is, let me swing back up here, is sleep disturbances leading to fatigue. Most perimenopausal, postmenopausal women feel so much better if they have a little progesterone cream, because they find it helps them sleep a little bit better. Water retention, menstrual irregularities, low libido, uterine fibroids, weight gain, brain fog, mood changes, and acne. And then symptoms of excess cortisol is weight gain, inability to lose weight, mood swings, brain fog, fatigue, muscle weakness, poor sleep, lowered immune function, low libido, hypertension, and blood sugar dysregulation. Whew. Okay, so let's chat estrogen. So we've got the pregnenolone at the top, and then off of that comes the DHEA, right? So DHEA is a precursor hormone to estrogen and testosterone. So it kind of, they both branch off from there. So guys, yes, you do have estrogen, you have a little bit of progesterone, you got lots of cortisol. So all of these hormones apply to both men and women. We will have varying amounts in there, meaning that a guy is going to have a heck of a lot more testosterone than a woman will, and a woman's going to have more estrogen than a man will. But we all have varying amounts of these hormones. So when we talk estrogen, now I talked a little bit when we talked about progesterone, I talked about estrogen dominance. And so I'll kind of talk about what causes excess estrogen and then signs and symptoms of excess estrogen. But bear in mind, again, that just because you have symptoms of excess estrogen, it does not mean that you have too much estrogen in your body. It could actually be that your progesterone is just too low. Maybe you're in the beginning stages of pregnenolone steal. So maybe it's starting to take it from the progesterone and feed it down that way, and it just hasn't reached over to the DHEA arm yet. It could be that you are too stressed, like I said, so you got the pregnenolone steal. It could be that your body's just not producing as much progesterone as it needs. So before you run off and start treating for excess estrogen, I highly recommend that everybody gets their hormones tested, because if you're treating for excess estrogen and you're doing all these things to filter the estrogen out of the body, you could be making things worse if your estrogen was at a perfect level, but you just had low progesterone. So like every other hormone that we have, estrogen production will decrease with age. So progesterone decreases with age, DHEA will decrease with age, meaning that progesterone or estrogen and testosterone will also decrease with age. It just happens. It's an age thing. Isn't it grand? Estrogen is primarily produced in the ovaries, the adrenal glands, and adipose tissue, aka fat. So typically I will see estrogen dominance in overweight women, because if we have more fat cells, we are going to be producing more estrogen in the body. The higher the weight, the more likely you are to be estrogen dominant. It doesn't mean that you can't be thinner and have estrogen dominance. It just means that being a little bit heavier is going to increase your chances of having excess estrogen. So when we talk about estrogen dominance, there's a couple of things that come to mind. We can have estrogen dominant cancers. So there are cancers that are specifically linked to poor estrogen in the body. So we have different types of estrogen. So we've got good estrogen, we've got bad estrogen, we've got other estrogen. And it's really a delicate balance between the good and the bad estrogen. We obviously want more good than the bad. When we have more bad than the good, then we're susceptible to these estrogen type cancers. So breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. And I'm not talking about genetically linked cancers. So I'm not talking about HERS and BRCA and things like that. I am talking about specifically estrogen dominant breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. So those can come by having too much excess or too much estrogen in the body and too much of the wrong estrogen. So you can have great estrogen levels, but you can have too much of the wrong estrogen. You get too much of the wrong estrogen by poor diet. Some people say soy, but I'm going to bust that myth in a future blog when we talk about soy later on in next month, because soy, good quality soy, will actually raise your good estrogen to bring the ratio back in balance. And you can actually test for the estrogen ratio to see if your good is higher than your bad. So what causes excess estrogen? Low progesterone. So low progesterone doesn't actually cause excess estrogen. It just makes the body feel like you have too much estrogen. So low progesterone, excess weight. Remember, because they have the more fat cells that we have, the more estrogen we can produce. Poor liver function. Again, we filter all of our hormones through our liver. So if we're not taking care of our liver, if we're not allowing the body to do what it needs to do, things are going to get gummed up and backed up in there. And then what causes low estrogen? Menopause, obviously. Excessive exercise. And that leads into stress. So stress and excessive exercise, remember, pregnenolone steal. So if we have excessive stress and excessive exercise, we could be creating an environment where we have too much cortisol production, and they've got to get the hormones from somewhere. So it starts stealing the progesterone, starts stealing the pregnenolone, which then can't produce enough DHEA to get down to produce estrogen and progesterone, estrogen and testosterone. So what can cause it? Again, low progesterone, but again, doesn't necessarily mean you have too much estrogen. It just means that you could have not enough progesterone. Excessive weight, because we can create estrogen from fat cells. Poor liver function. And then what causes low estrogen is menopause, obviously, excessive exercise, stress, and then low body weight. So if we are underweight or too thin, we're not going to be able to produce as much estrogen as the body needs. And so that's why some people that are very, very thin will notice that they might have some menstrual irregularities. So symptoms of excess estrogen are going to be weight gain, cold hands and feet, which is interesting because that can also be attributed to thyroid problems or estrogen issues. Hair loss, which can also be attributed to thyroid problems and protein malabsorption, but it can be excess estrogen. Insomnia, fatigue, kind of go together, memory problems, irregular cycles, and belly bloat. So symptoms of a low estrogen is going to be painful intercourse because things aren't as slick down there, I guess. I'm trying to say it in a nice way. Increased UTIs, mood swings, hot flashes, headaches, depression, fatigue, and menstrual irregularities. And so you're seeing this fatigue and this weight issue over and over and over again. So weight gain, inability to lose weight, fatigue, all of those kind of are good indications that if your diet's right, you're exercising, is a good chance that your hormones are off. Or if you feel like you're a fairly healthy person, but you got diagnosed fatty liver or your liver enzymes are up, I would look at the hormone. Add an S there, hormones, because we've got more than one. Okay, so before we move on to testosterone, let's just recap with the estrogen. So again, pregnenolone, DHEA goes down to estrogen and testosterone. Guys have estrogen. Guys can have estrogen dominance, so it's not just a lady thing. It's going to decrease with age, just like all of our hormones do. It's primarily produced in the ovaries, the adrenals, and adipose tissue. So if you are overweight, there is a good there's a good possibility that you're going to create too much estrogen for your body. So weight loss typically leads to a better balance in our estrogen or our hormones as a whole. Let's see. So we use estrogen not just for, a girlish figure. We actually use it in the brains, the bones, the organs. We have good and bad estrogen. You want a nice ratio between the two, more good than bad. Poor diet, excessive weight, just poor overall lifestyle is going to increase the bad estrogen over the good. And if we have too much bad and not enough good, the ratio is imbalanced. We can get estrogen-dominant cancers such as breast cancer, uterine cancer, and ovarian cancer, not ones that are linked to a genetic issue. So you could have amazing hormones, but if you carry any genetic abnormalities, obviously that's a different concern. So excess estrogen can be caused by low progesterone, excess weight, poor liver function, again, because we process all of our hormones through the liver. Low estrogen can be caused by menopause. Not a whole lot you can do about that. Excess exercise, stress, and low body weight. Symptoms of too much estrogen is weight gain, cold hands, feet, hair loss, insomnia, fatigue, memory problems, irregular cycles, and bloating. And then symptoms of low estrogen is painful intercourse, increased UTIs, mood swings, hot flashes, headaches, depression, fatigue, and menstrual irregularities. Okay, so testosterone. This is the last one. Yes, that is the last hormone we're going to address tonight because it is a lot. And see, this is only like what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hormones we're talking about, right? You have 50, over 50 in the body. This is why it makes my head hurt. Okay, testosterone. And some people like to call it, T, low T, high T. So testosterone is produced in the ovaries. Ladies, we have testosterone. And the testes, obviously, for men, and the adrenals, right? So we produce a lot of our hormones in the adrenals. If we've taxed those suckers and they're tired as hell, they're not going to keep up with what we need. I think people associate testosterone as being the male hormone, but again, we have it, we need it, we use it. And I will talk here in just a minute about one of the 2 biggest issues when women have lack of testosterone. So it's actually pretty important to our health. Testosterone does help us prevent cardiovascular disease. It helps us maintain adequate bone density, and it helps us maintain muscle tone. Testosterone is downstream from DHEA, so remember pregnenolone, and you've got progesterone and DHEA. Down from progesterone, we've got cortisol. Down from DHEA, we've got estrogen and testosterone. A good indication for women to notice if you have low T is going to be a lack of muscle tone and exercise intolerance. So if you're not working out and you have lack of muscle tone, I wouldn't immediately jump to the low T thing. If you are working out, you feel like you're working out enough to produce adequate muscle tone, meaning that you should be seeing some changes, you're getting your diet right, you're doing all the weight resistance training that you should, but you're not increasing your muscle mass, or you're not noticing that your body fat is dropping, might be time to get your testosterone levels checked, or your hormones as a whole, your sex hormones as a whole checked. And then exercise intolerance is another one. If you feel like you were able to exercise like a rock star and just over time it really started to decline, you haven't really changed your exercise routine, but you've noticed it's consistently become harder and harder and harder until you feel like you just can't do it anymore and you feel like absolute crud afterwards, that's a good indication that you might have some low testosterone, or low T as they like it. So symptoms of low T, it's the same in both men and women, is going to be fatigue, lack of muscle tone, exercise intolerance, hot flashes, loss of bone mass, increased body fat, insomnia, mood swings, and loss of libido. So for men who are on the heavier side, again, because estrogen is made in adipose tissue, they're going to have more estrogen and less testosterone. And so that's why when they work out, they may feel like, I can't do this, it's too hard, or maybe they're not seeing the gains that they want to see, is because we need to drop some of the weight to stop producing so much estrogen so that the body can then start to have more testosterone than estrogen for guys. So symptoms of excess testosterone, and this is in women. So we have different symptoms in women and men with excess testosterone. So symptoms of excess testosterone in women is going to be excess facial hair or body hair. So sometimes women as we're nearing menopause, we might notice that we're having some more hairs, like the peach fuzz is starting to get longer and thicker. And then we might have some little chin hairs here and there. That's excess testosterone. Acne. But acne is also related to low progesterone or excess estrogen as well. Loss of hair on the head. Changes to the shape of the body. So estrogen is what gives us, the female figure. And that's why when we go through menopause, we have more testosterone after menopause. I take that back. We have pretty much the same amount. It's kind of across the board, but whereas estrogen, progesterone was up here, now it's below testosterone post-menopause. And so that's why we notice changes to the figure. Maybe we have more of a straight down, or we have more of a belly area than we did before. Oily skin, excuse you, well, the dog's just burped, and then voice hoarseness. You can get voice hoarseness from thyroid issues. You can get it from talking too much. So again, it's really good to just get your hormones tested. And then symptoms of excess testosterone in men is going to be a swollen prostate, acne, oily skin, testosterone, mood swings, decreased testicle size, and water retention. Mood swings is a big one. Okay, so just to kind of recap on testosterone, again, it's pregnenolone, goes down to DHEA, which then breaks off into estrogen and testosterone. Testosterone is produced in the ovaries, the testes, and the adrenal gland. We need it. Ladies, we have it. We need it. We want it. We just don't want as much as guys. Symptoms of low T in both women and men is the exact same. It's going to be fatigue, a lack of muscle tone, exercise intolerance, hot flashes, loss of bone mass, increased body fat, insomnia, mood swings, loss of libido. Excess T in women is going to be excess facial hair or body hair, acne, loss of hair on the head, Changes to the shape of the body, oily skin, and voice hoarseness. And symptoms of excess T in men is going to be swollen prostate, acne, oily skin, insomnia, decreased testicle size, mood swings is a big one, and then water retention. So that is hormones in a nutshell. Let me just see if we have any questions, etc., before we talk about how to balance those suckers. Penny said, my eating habits haven't changed, but it's more difficult to get motivated to exercise. So sounds like I have too much estrogen. Motivation to exercise does not mean that you have too much estrogen or too little testosterone. Sometimes we just lose motivation. For me, I get super bored exercising. So I really need things that stimulate my mind while I'm exercising. And I cannot do the same thing for too long. So I can't take one class and do it over and over and over and over and over again. Or I can't just go to the gym, run on the treadmill, lift some weights. I have to have different classes of varying length and type and sizes, and it needs to be with different people. I just need a lot of stimulation of different kinds in order to enjoy the exercise. So lack of motivation doesn't mean that your hormones are out of balance. It just means that you kind of lost the motivation to exercise, which is pretty normal. Okay, wow, it's been 50 minutes. Holy hell. Okay, so let me just kind of wrap this up pretty quick. So when we test hormones, I prefer the Dutch test. I do it in my office. You can find a practitioner wherever you are that does Dutch testing. The reason that I like it is because it tests urinary metabolites. You can go to your physician and you can get a serum test of hormones. All that's going to tell you is how much of that hormone that you have in the body. It doesn't tell you how your body's using that hormones. Urinary metabolites will tell us how your body's utilizing the hormones, what your hormone levels are, and where the disconnect is. If you've got high cortisol, but all the others are low, it's going to look at your DHEA levels. It's going to look at your methylation pathways. It's going to look at your levels of good estrogen to bad estrogen, how they all kind of feed into each other. And then what your body's doing with them, whereas a serum test, it doesn't. Some people like to do like a buccal swab, a mouth swab for cortisol or other hormones. Again, it's just going to tell us what our body is, how much our body's pumping out. It doesn't look at also how our body's using them. So I really like urinary metabolites when it comes to hormones. So there's three main reasons that I see why our hormones get out of balance. Stress, which we talked about, that is a huge one. Stress will kill all your other hormones in an instant, especially if you are high stress, prolonged stress person. Stress will absolutely throw off your hormones over time, and it just kind of, it's like a tumbleweed. It just gets bigger and worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Excessive weight will also cause your hormones to be out of balance, and impaired liver function. So again, if we are not giving the nutrients that our body needs to properly allow the liver to do its own processes. Again, our liver is our detox, and I'm pointing here because that's where our liver is. Our liver does our own internal detox system, and so we need to make sure that we're feeding the nutrients to take care of the liver to do what it needs to do. Whole other convoluted system. If you look at the blog, scroll to the bottom, I put a picture of the liver detox pathways. There's phase 1 and 2. So it's a whole nother animal to try to, get in line. But if you've been told you have fatty liver, either through a CAT scan or an ultrasound, liver enzymes are elevated, is a good indication that either you're just not eating right or your hormones are out of balance. So for me, getting hormones back in balance, if I truly suspect hormone imbalance, the first thing I'm going to ask my clients to do is do some testing. Let's do some testing, let's do some testing, and let's do some testing. Because that'll give us an idea, okay, exactly which hormones are out of balance and what we need to do to repair the process. When we're doing that process, I also like to do stress management techniques. So there are a plethora of stress management techniques that you can do. I encourage you to find the one that works best for you. Meditation is a big one. A lot of people are anti-meditation because they think it's sitting like this, doing Om for hours and hours on end, and that is absolutely false. Meditation can be prayer to you if you are a churchgoer or a God believer. It could be walking outside by yourself, smelling the flowers and listening to the birds and putting all other thoughts out of your mind. It could be just sitting in silence and reading a book and only focusing on that book. So meditation comes in all forms. You can do guided meditation. They have free ones on YouTube. You can download different apps. I know that Headspace is pretty popular. Or you can just count. Counting your breaths, counting in for 6, hold 2, breathe out for 4, in for 6, hold 2, out for 4. Anything that you can do to stop your mind from brooding. When we're stressed, we brood. We think about what we need to do tomorrow. We think about what happened today. We think about what ticked us off. We think about this. We think about that. And we're constantly thinking, especially women. We need to get off that train. We need to stop thinking so much and start relaxing. When we start relaxing, we allow the body to start doing what it's supposed to do. Stress causes weight gain. It causes the hormone imbalance. It's going to lead to fatigue. It causes cravings in the body. It causes us to not want to do anything, and it really just ticks us off. So meditation in whatever form that looks like to you is a great way to reduce stress. Doing some liver work. So again, doing things to promote the natural detox pathways of the body. Cleaning up your diet is going to be a big one, making sure that you're getting plenty of vegetables in. And doing so bitter foods really help to ramp up bile production in the liver, which helps it to do what it's supposed to do. So arugula, dandelion greens, drinking dandelion root tea, milk thistle is an herb that's typically good. Cilantro, coriander, all of those are going to be really good for the liver. And then again, looking at the chart, and you can see the different nutrients that are needed to help promote the phase 1, phase 2 detox pathways. And then weight loss. That's a tricky one for everybody. It's not always calories in versus calories out. The content of those calories matter. Are we eating 1,500 calories in burgers a day, or are we eating 1,500 calories of good quality proteins, whole grains, lots of fruits and vegetables? Are we exercising? Are we taking care of ourselves? Are we prioritizing us so that we are around to prioritize the people that we love? If you don't take care of yourself, where are you going to live, right? You got to have a body to live in as we age. And if you don't take care of it, it's not going to be there to support you so that you can continue living. But weight loss will come with time once the underlying issues are repaired. So if you have an inability to lose weight because of hormones, repairing those hormones, doing the work necessary, and putting the time in to get those suckers back in balance is what's going to help you lose weight. No amount of leafy greens is going to do it for you if your hormones are out of whack. So getting those back in order. So again, weight loss or stress reduction, assisting the detox phase 1, phase 2 pathways, and then weight loss. Obviously, eventually it will come in time. So super extensive, lots of information. I apologize for keeping you guys here for almost an hour. I mean, that's a lot of time, and it's a lot of time to listen to me drone on about hormones. If you haven't taken a look at the blog, I highly encourage that you do that. Hearing me talk about it and then reading it will help you ingest the information a little bit more. Explore some of the other blogs, because when I talk about stress, some of the other blogs have a lot of stress tips on it. When I talk about nutrients from the liver or weight loss, I talk about all those in lots of different blogs. So have a poke around the blogs on the website. And then if you're watching this after the fact, go ahead and leave a comment if you have a question. I do monitor these, and I will get back to you. Thanks for hanging with me, the couple of you that did. I appreciate it. And have a good night. Bye.